It's time for a roundtable.
Alright guys, so for our roundtable discussion today, we have Axel along with
DuckNoises and Mossies.
Mossies is doing on the podcast.
Yeah, he's part of the roundtable this time. They're going to be discussing Link's Awakening in lieu of it coming out on the virtual console for the 3DS.
Well, that's awesome.
I know it's awesome.
And I can't believe they got Mossies on it.
That's awesome. You guys are going to get to hear from our webmaster.
Alright, so take it away, Axel.
Alright, so our guests for this time are DuckNoises, who is one of our forum moderators. What's up, DuckNoises?
Hello.
And we also have Mossies, who is the webmaster of Zelda Dungeon. What's up, Mossies?
Hi, I'm Mossies, and I'm kind of a big deal around here.
It's a very big deal. We wouldn't be here without Mossies. Alright, so basically what this roundtable is going to be about is it's kind of similar to the last one where we talked about Majora's Mask, but in relation to the series, like how it measures up. But more, what we're doing here is we're going to talk about how the series measures up to Link's Awakening, how the series that came after had to do with, Link's Awakening, which came before most of the games in the series, or at least the majority of them. So let's start off by, DuckNoises. What is your, very quickly, what's your general opinion, overall thought on Link's Awakening?
Well, I really love the game. It's one of my favorite Zelda games. It's very creative and very, very imaginative. That it's just such a great experience. It's got a lot of variety in it, and I really like it.
And Mossies, what's your thoughts?
It's not my favorite Zelda game. It's not my least favorite game. It's sort of right in the middle, and it does so many things. It's like the oddball of the series. There are so many things that are so different, and I think we'll talk about a lot of those later on.
Alright, well, I remember there was this one quote, and I don't know if I'm making this up, because I thought I saw a quote about the developers saying that a lot of the things in Link's Awakening seemed like they were, they did a lot of things with Link's Awakening that influenced the rest of the series, and that's kind of what inspired me to make this whole discussion to begin with. I actually got that feeling while playing it as well. Do you remember that quote, Mossies? You know more about the quotes and stuff than I do.
Yeah, it was talked about in Iwata Asks episode, I think about a year ago. They were talking about a lot of the older Zelda games. And the developers were basically talking about how since it was a Game Boy game, it wasn't a console game, they were allowed to do so many things differently. They were allowed to do a lot of experimenting. And a lot of those ideas didn't catch on really, but a lot of them really did. And when we think about a lot of things that are in Zelda games today, we can pinpoint back to Link's Awakening to see the different things they did, such as an entire village of talking animals. I'm not sure how much Twilight Princess with all their talking animals contributes or was brought from Link's Awakening, but that's one of the examples.
Well, what I love about Link's Awakening is that you have From A Link to the Past is a very serious game. It's very foreboding. There's not a lot of humor in the game. It's kind of dry, but it works for A Link to the Past. Whereas Link's Awakening is very zany and eccentric, and a lot of the characters are very funny. For example, there's some of the characters. A common theme is breaking the fourth wall. There are children at the beginning of the game who reference the control scheme and say, "Oh, but I don't know what that means because I'm just a kid," or how convenient those controls are that you can push this button or that button. And it's I love how the game takes itself seriously, and well, the game wants you to take it seriously at the same time as the characters completely disregard any seriousness in the game, and it's just offset really is a really funny game in that sense, that it's got examples of characters from other franchises, like Mario enemies crop up. You've got a Yoshi doll, and it mentions that the Yoshi doll Yoshi's been in a bunch of games, and it completely breaks the fourth wall and adds. All the characters are hilarious, and it's something you can see in games like Ocarina of Time that come through that a lot of a character like Rudo, who you would never, who's just really funny and odd, that you wouldn't see in something like A Link to the Past, and that's something that carries through the rest of the series.
Yeah, I really think that the characters in Link's Awakening really stand out. And you were mentioning the kids in Mabe Village, or the quadruplets, I think they were called.
Yeah.
Another thing, one of the quadruplets, their father, he's part of the trade. He's part of the trading sequence early on in the game, and when you were his mother, well, when you talk to him early on in the game, he tells you, I'm going to get lost later on in the game, and I'm going to be in the mountain or in the hills, whatever he says.
I love that.
That is one of my favorite parts, I swear to God.
It's
so ridiculous.
It's so strange and crazy. Like, what the hell is he talking about? Yet, later on in the game, lo and behold, he is lost, just as he said. So, yeah, I'm not sure if that's in the same sense of the breaking the fourth wall, but...
Oh, yeah.
It's just funny, in a way. And going to the characters, the enemies and such, yeah, there's a lot of Mario enemies. There's a Goomba, a Piranha Plant. There's also Kirby-based enemies, too.
Oh, yeah, there's Kirby. He's late in the game, yeah.
Yeah, the anti-Kirby, I think that's what the official guide refers to it as, and it just acts and looks just like Kirby. So, yeah, the NPCs in the game are really great.
Yeah, and there's a lot of little things like that. Like, there's all kinds of Easter eggs and stuff. Weren't you talking about that a little while ago, Mossies?
Yeah, there's a lot of things. I've been playing that game for 15 years, and there's still things today that I'm just discovering. I've been doing some work for the website for Link's Awakening, and I just found out a couple of days ago that when you have Bow Wow, basically the Chain Chomp from the Mario series, it's another connection, and you're walking around with Bow Wow, and then you can find the monkey who's part of the trading sequence. And if they run into each other, Bow Wow sort of starts attacking the monkey. And this is one of those things that's just so odd and strange, yet it's tossed into the game, and it's sort of made for you to, after you've beaten the game, you're just messing around and you just discover these things. And that's one of like a dozen things found throughout the quest.
Yeah, and that's definitely like something that they didn't really do in the old Zelda games, like up until Link to the Past. I mean, there may be like small examples, though I can't think of any off the top of my head. But then, like afterwards in Ocarina of Time, you've got all kinds of things like that, and they just keep going on throughout the series. They add all these humorous moments. They add all these like funny little references to the other games in the series. They just have stuff like that they didn't do until Link's Awakening. So I definitely think that you guys are right. That's when it kind of started.
One of the side stories, too, that I really like, they really started to developing characters having their own side stories. I'm not just talking about the major character, too. I'm talking about some of the minor characters. For an example, one of my favorite little exchanges between characters, it's part of the trading sequence, but in Mabe Village, or not Mabe, north of Mabe Village, there's a character, Mr. Wright. He's basically like a...
Oh, Mr. Wright.
Yeah,
yes.
Mr. Wright. He's like a postman. I don't know what he is. He just writes letters.
Yeah, it's a pun.
And then in Animal Village, there's a goat. And she basically is the same thing as Mr. Wright, but the animal version. So they're sort of like pen pals in a way. I think it's making like reference to the 80s and 90s, how pen pals were such a big deal. And the goat actually writes a letter, and you have to deliver it to Mr. Wright. And when you finally do deliver it, Mr. Wright opens up the letter, and it's actually a picture of, well, what's supposed to be the goat, but she fakes her identity, and it's actually a picture of Princess Peach from the Mario series. So it's sort of like the whole internet thing where you can have a fake identity because you're not in person, it's through email or pen pal or whatever, and then sort of Link is caught up in the middle of this trading quest, in this, connection between these two one-off characters. So it's like in the middle of your quest, you're going through all these dungeons, there's these two characters on the other side of Koholint Island, and they have this strange connection, and they have their own story, and that's awesome. Found throughout. There's so many of these things in the game too.
A lot of the characters are great too, because they've got all sorts of things. There's Terran and Marin, who are basically early prototypes. Yeah, Talon and Malon, which are basically early prototypes of the ones you see in Ocarina of Time. And Terran has this whole story about him he gets turned into a raccoon, and you have to go fix him. And there's that whole element. And a lot of that segues into the atmosphere nicely, because there's something throughout the whole game that makes it feel that it's just not right. And at the core of this quest is figuring out what it is, because the plot of the game isn't very event driven. It's more there are little clues that you pick up on throughout the game, and you have to put them together like a puzzle. And you try and as you get closer and closer to the end of the game, you kind of figure out, you get a general idea of what's going on, but it's very vague. And this idea that you get in the game, you get clues throughout the rest of the thing, and there's little prophecies and elements of dialogue that come around, and they reference this whole quest when you finally your goal in the quest is to confront the windfish, and who's just this entity who tells you who you are and what you're doing, or who's supposed to, and you this is because at the beginning of the game, Link is in a shipwreck and he has amnesia. And so most of the game is trying to figure out where he is and what's going on, because it is not laid out for you. You have to figure it out in the entire game, and it's very mysterious, and it feels unsettling, but it's completely set off by the whole zany characters who don't take the plot seriously at all, whereas you have the plot, which seems very serious, but then one moment you've got the characters just pretending that it has absolutely nothing to do with them, and there's these two contrasting things that just make an excellent balance of the game to make it feel hilarious and serious and intriguing, and it just works so well for the plot.
You mentioned how the story, how it's not really an eventful story, but there's a lot of little things. I sort of disagree, actually, because I think it's a very eventful story, in that there's these little things that are changing, but your mission almost changes throughout the quest. Like, at the very beginning, when you land on the island, and you're more of, what the heck is going on? How do I get back to my ship, or how do I get back to Hyrule, wherever he was going? But then as the quest goes on, your mission is completely different from level to level, basically. And the story sort of gradually unfolds, and it's very cryptic too. There's those owl statues all over the overworld that give you these strange messages, like nothing is as it seems, and this isn't, what reality isn't true, and all those little things. And it sort of messes with your mind a little bit. They're trying to
definitely
trick you into thinking. I don't know about tricking you, but it's really messing with you. It's not as clear as some of the other more straightforward Zelda games that came before it and after it, actually.
Certainly, it's a very deep game, because the plot I keep thinking about, like, I beat this game a long time ago, and I still think about what happens in the plot and what it all means, because I won't give anything away, but it's very open to interpretation, this game. It's not cut and dry. Everyone has a different perspective on this game, and it all comes through into something that you form a lot of what happens, and your understanding of the game is very different from other people, and how you see it could be drastically different, and how it comes together, because it's not. I say it's not event driven in that I mean that it's not. You can't all come and agree, oh, this is what happens, and this is why it happens. It's more of something happened, but you have to figure out yourself why it happens and what it means.
When I first played the game, I was actually pretty surprised, because, I had heard enough about it to know that it was a good game, but I was quite shocked when I actually played it at how, really good the game was, and especially how familiar it was. There were so many things I thought when I played that game that just, not even talking about the storyline stuff, and all the things, about character development, whimsy, that it originated before, the rest of the games in the series did stuff like that. But, there was like stuff with the gameplay that made it kind of feel like I was playing Ocarina of Time. I mean, there was totally like things, even down to subtleties of how you like used your shield and stuff that kind of felt like this is where Ocarina of Time came from a little bit. And I felt like I was playing a 2D Ocarina of Time, and that it was jarring when I'm playing this game and I'm saying this is just like Ocarina of Time, and then it's jarring when I realize that in a way Ocarina of Time was more like this game. This game started that. I think the Marin and Tarin, Malin and Talon comparison is actually a good example of that, and maybe they even threw that in as like an Easter egg to reference this. What do you think?
I'm not sure about all the connections with Ocarina of Time. Perhaps this is just because we played the games in a different order. When I first played Link's Awakening, I was thinking more of it along the lines of a handheld version of A Link to the Past. And I was very skeptical about it. I didn't know if it would work, because it's, I was sort of late into the whole Game Boy thing.
Right.
The Game Boy thing. And, so I was thinking, oh yeah, that's not a serious game. It's just a handheld, for, people to play in the backseat of their cars. But I was surprised how fluid the gameplay was. It actually played like the Super Nintendo version, I thought. And I thought it was a full-blown quest. It wasn't this like handheld it wasn't handheld. It wasn't some like mini side game, which for whatever reason that was my initial thought about the game when I first played it. But in relation to its connections with Ocarina of Time, we sort of touched upon that, how a lot of the things were borrowed from future games. But I definitely think it played more like the original Legend of Zelda and A Link to the Past. Probably just because it was 2D.
Yeah, I agree that it plays like in gameplay. It's very much much more like A Link to the Past or the original Legend of Zelda. Particularly the original, because but the shield and the items, the way they function is less like A Link to the Past, and it's newer. And what Axel was going into about the fact that you have a lot of the items. You've got a 2-item system where you can go in the start menu and select things, and it's what I love about the game is that the sword is not a mandatory item per se. You're not always using your sword, and you use all these different combinations of items, and it has a lot of variety in the game, because there are so many different ways to beat bosses, and there are a lot of different ways you can figure out that I didn't know I could do that, and there are little combinations you can use with some of the items. And in terms of it being a full-fledged game, it really is. There are a lot of secrets in this game. There's a lot of replay value, especially if you're playing the deluxe version. You can play this game over and over and over again, back to back. And there's so much extra stuff in there. There's also going back to Easter eggs. And the gameplay it's a very solid game. Don't underestimate it when you think, oh, it's a handheld game. It is very solid and very large.
One thing I actually wanted your guys' thoughts on is the difficulty, because frankly, out of like all the Zelda games I've played, and granted I haven't played the original 2 NES ones, I actually struggled through this game more than any other Zelda game. I even needed to find walkthroughs for some of the puzzles that I couldn't figure out. I struggled through this game. Did either of you have that experience or thought?
I thought a little bit in two different senses. One in terms of pure difficulty in terms of number of deaths, because I thought some of the early bosses gave me trouble the first time around. Like Genie, for example.
Oh yeah, he's hard.
It's a fairly basic boss battle.
Yeah, but he's hard. He's easy to figure out, but he's hard in practice.
Right, and he's...
I had the opposite experience with Moldorm. The exact same experience with Moldorm.
Moldorm is a perfect example too, where it's such a simplistic boss. You know exactly what to do, especially if you've played A Link to the Past. Yet it's just difficult. You get knocked off the edges against Genie. He just does so much damage every time he hits you. So I found myself dying a lot in this game, probably more so than almost any Zelda game other than the old NES ones. And then on the flip side, there's the difficulty in terms of the puzzles, or the what do I need to do next type difficulty.
Oh, absolutely. I had a lot of trouble with that as well.
Right, and I had that especially in the later dungeons.
Oh yeah.
Eagle's Tower, the 7th dungeon, and Turtle Rock, the 8th dungeon, just because they're just gigantic and there's so many different places to go. It's not linear at all. There's so many different things. You can do things in different order. And, yeah, it really, I stumbled a lot in terms of that. And, yeah.
Yeah, well, going into the difficulty for those that have played, who have been used to a lot of the newer Zelda games, so say the Minish Cap and forward, especially those that have played stuff, have only played stuff like Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, they are gonna hate the difficulty in this game because it is pretty hard. Particularly the puzzles, because the puzzles are very difficult, and some of them will take you a while to figure out. Particularly, there's one in the 2nd dungeon that took me like 4 hours to figure out, and I kicked myself when I figured this out. I'm like, man, I am so dumb. But a lot of the puzzles will get you, but once you get it, you realize that it's not as hard as it seems, but a lot of things will throw you for a loop. Yeah, but the puzzles are quite hard. They're a lot of the things that they're more complex than A Link to the Past, which is what I think a lot of the people found. But in terms of, yeah, the puzzles are pretty complex. You've got something, especially like Eagle's Tower, which is, you've got a huge dungeon-wide puzzle that you have to do, and the dungeon changes based on things you do in the dungeon, and it's enormous. I love that dungeon. It is very, very hard, but I love that dungeon. That's my favorite dungeon in the game.
A lot of those puzzles that throughout the game that give you a challenge, they actually offer a lot of help, though.
Yeah, they do. There's this like the little stone tablets in the wall in A Link to the Past. There's like collecting the dungeon key in the compass. There's an owl beak or a stone tablet in the Game Boy, not the DX version, that they give you. It gives you a little clue on some of the puzzles in the dungeon, or some of the bosses and some of the trickier enemies, and that it helps you. But sometimes it's still hard.
Well, if you would have used that in the 2nd dungeon, you probably wouldn't have had trouble with that puzzle.
I did, and I still had trouble because I didn't know what the names of the enemies were.
Okay, fair enough. But even in the overworld, actually, like A Link to the Past had this with the fortune tellers. That, like, you can go to the fortune tellers and they sort of hint towards what you need to do next. In Link's Awakening, it was a lot more prominent. There was those telephone booths all over the overworld, and if you actually walk into those telephone booths and you call the guy from Maeve Village, he actually gives you a lot of help. It really is straightforward, too, some of his clues, where if you're stuck, you'll go in and be like, oh yeah, that's what I need to do. And so there was a lot of those sort of in-game help triggers from the game.
Alright, so I think that's all about all we have time for, guys. Real quick, though, do you have any final thoughts about Link's Awakening?
Well, I think it's a great game, and I think even though it's old and it's coming out on a Virtual Console, but even if you don't want to wait, because I love this game so much that I got to the final boss, and then I lost the game, and I couldn't find it for a long time, so I went and bought another copy on eBay, just because I love this game so much, and I think you should all go and try and go to a used game store and pick up this game, because it is great.
I think its legacy really showed with the rest of the series. We talked about it already with all the little things that were brought back, even like the Ocarina and Ocarina of Time, with the different songs. That's like another thing. There's so many things. And after Majora's Mask, when Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons ended up releasing, they basically used the same engine as Link's Awakening, but
yeah, they did.
I really think they took it to another level, though. I think they really pushed it. Like, one of the things that really bothered me going back to Link's Awakening in comparison to the Oracle of Ages is in Oracle of Ages, when you were in a giant room, basically, the screen scrolled left, right, up, down. It was not fixed to just that actual screen. It's sort of hard to put into
No,
words.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Anyone who's played, I think, would understand that.
Right, so Oracle of Ages had a lot of giant rooms, especially in some of their dungeons. And that was sort of I missed that a little bit going back to Link's Awakening, because all the rooms, it was almost claustrophobic in a way, because it was really tight. The rooms, the screen size is small. I mean, looking at the boss battle with Moldorm.
That's probably why it's hard.
Right. So, I think there was a lot of advances with Link's Awakening. They used the core gameplay and made 2 great games in Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. And then again, a lot of the ideas carried over. But overall, Link's Awakening is great. It's classic. Everybody should get it who has a 3DS, and should get it on Virtual Console for sure. It's a must-have, I think.
Certainly.
All right, well, guys, glad to have you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, and I'll see you guys next time. And just before we go, for your listening pleasure, I've got the outtake of sorts from in the middle of the recording when I dropped from the conference, and this is what happened.
So Axel's no longer here.
Okay. That could be fun for him to edit.
Yeah, I bug Axel on a regular basis that his internet is not the best sometimes.
Axel, we gotta get you like a T1 line or something, because this dropping stuff's gotta stop.
We'll mail it to you.
And we'll pay the incredibly high bill for it too. Actually, maybe ask Mossies about that one.
Anyway, thank you so much, guys, for the Link's Awakening roundtable. And we will move on to our next segment.